To begin things off, you'll see above me is our continuation of the March General Meeting. Everyone can read that okay? The first item on the agenda, there are 3 items. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a mover to approve the minutes? What's your name? Elizabeth Bade? Bate. Thank you, David. Perfect. Sorry, we just got to make sure that we have everyone written down. Can I get a seconder? What's your name? Stefan Hamade. Nice. Thanks for being here today. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Yes. Thank you, Sean. Is there a seconder on the motion? Okay, so there's a seconder. What's your name? Jesse McGinnis. Thanks, Jesse. So Jesse moves to table this, just so you know, the approval of the minutes because they had not properly been circulated to the October general meeting, so you can approve them then. Is there any discussion? Yes, no problem. Yeah. Just a comment to speak into the microphone. We'll have a microphone going around when you do talk. But Sean, just to repeat, you said the minutes weren't properly circulated. And does anyone want to speak to that? If not, the motion is to table the approval of those minutes. All those in favor, please raise your placards nice and high. Can I get my counters? Green's not good. $67, I count roughly 67, pardon? 36 on that side, so 67. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, there's one opposed. Any abstentions? 2 abstentions, would you like those noted? 2 opposed, sorry. Any more opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. This will be tabled to the October general meeting. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2. So this is a little bit tricky. Normally what we would do is we'd read a motion, be it resolved that these amendments to the bylaws 8A, 8B, 8C, and 8D are approved. This motion was already brought forward by Sean Hunt at the last general meeting, so it does not need a vote. We're actually going to be talking about an amendment to 8A. Everyone following? Could you open up the amendment? So before we approve this motion up here, we're going to be discussing 8A. So 8A, amending section, what is that, 8B or 10B? 8B. Members to read the follows. The Board of Directors shall consist of 4 executives, 2 councillors, and 5 other full members of the corporation. Additionally, the General Manager shall serve as an ex officio non-voting resource member. No individual may hold multiple seats on the board. The directors, other than the executives, shall be elected at the March General Meeting to hold office for a subsequent year. In the event of vacancy among the elected directors, including due to the failure of the March General Meeting to elect a full 7 directors, the Board of Directors may appoint a replacement from the councillors or the full members as the case may be. Unless otherwise directed by the Board, the Vice President Internal shall serve as the Secretary of the Board. That motion was brought forward by Jesse? Sean, you're speaking to the amendment? So we're speaking to 8A amendment? Okay. Sure. Yeah. Where's the second mic? David, do you have a microphone in your hand? You're president, ladies and gentlemen. Where's the laughs?
So what I believe happened is that we voted at the March meeting to divide 8A and vote and discuss on that separately. And then President Collins moved to replace the 5 other full members of the corporation with 3. So I think we're debating and then going that one to vote on that amendment first.
Right, that's right. So we're voting up in the top right corner. It says 5. David Collins has moved to change that to 3. David, would you like to speak to your amendment to the motion? There's no Anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Does everyone understand the amendment? Okay, yes. Sure, sorry, can you just stand up? Someone's going to come over with a microphone for you. Can you just say your name, first and last? David, sorry, just when the mic gets to you. Thanks.
I would like to speak against this amendment. I think it's good to have at-large members on the board.
Okay,
More at-large and a bigger board.
okay, thank you. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns? David, would you like to speak into the mic? In my hand.
The original
I get a workout.
The original spirit of my amendment was based on the fact that the more people that the more people that you actually have on a body actually decreases its effectiveness. And I did a little bit of research into it, and it seems as though the optimal group size is 7 people, and per other person that you put on, the research that I read, which is available on the Harvard Business Review by people named Menko, Rogers, and something else I forget, pardon me, say that if your board decreases, or your team decreases by 10% for every person that you put on past 7 people. So that's what the original spirit of my amendment came from. It was not, again, to decrease accountability or student transparency.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no other conversation, we're going to call the question, voting on the amendment to the previous amendment. So we're voting on A, we're changing, I'm just going to read that first sentence. The new amendment will be the board of directors shall consist of the 4 executive, 2 counselors, and 3, we're on 3? 3 other full members of the corporation. All those in favor, please raise your placards nice and high. All right. All those opposed? I'm going to get this right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122 Did you guys come together? Seven, 8. Okay. Oh, on that side, right.
Can you clarify the colors? People are getting confused with which ones they can be voting with and which ones they can't.
Okay.
Just, this is everyone. Yellow is for the first meeting, green is for the second meeting.
Right.
Just a quick clarification with your votes. Orange is your personal vote, which you can be used for both meetings. Yellow is a proxy vote if you hold one for the first meeting, and green is a proxy vote for the second. So if you raise a green during this meeting, it will not count. Please raise your yellow if you are holding a proxy during this meeting.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. We have done all those in favor, all those opposed, any abstentions? Okay, the motion fails. 38 in favor, 48 opposed, 0 abstentions. That brings us back to the original motion on the table. Could you just flip back for me for a sec? Thanks. We're still on 8A. Okay, so how would you like me to proceed? Please go back. So this is the motion, now we're moving forward. Pretend that didn't happen, and what you see here is what we're voting on putting forward today. I'm not going to read the first paragraph again, but I am going to scroll through the rest when we get to it, which is next. Right now we're just voting on 8A. Is there someone who would like to speak to the proposed amendment 8A? Yes, please, stand up, say your name.
Jesse McGinnis. I'd like to propose an amendment.
Sure.
So I'm not sure, I sent it to the secretary, but I'm not sure how to get it onto the screen.
Okay.
So I can read it out loud. Sorry. Okay, so I would like to make an amendment to change this entire section to, what? No, it's fine. So the board of directors shall be comprised of the president and 10 full members of the corporation who shall not be the executive. Additionally,
Maybe
the
read
general
the second
manager
one.
shall serve as an ex
Start the second
officio
one.
non-voting resource member. No individual may hold multiple seats on the board. Second paragraph, each director at the time of their appointment and throughout their term of office must be a full member of the corporation. Directors must be at least 18 years of age and not bankrupt as per section 23 of the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. Third paragraph, the directors, other than the president, shall be elected at the March general meeting to hold office for the subsequent year. Fourth paragraph, in the event of a vacancy among the elected directors, including due to the failure of the March general meeting to elect a full 10 directors, the board of directors may appoint a replacement from the full members. Fifth paragraph, the secretary of the board shall be chosen from the voting members of the board by the board. And last paragraph, in the absence of the chair or secretary, the board may temporarily appoint another director in their stead. So I will try to get that on the screen, but that is the motion I move, the amendment I move.
Okay, we are currently getting that motion text up on the screen. Yes. Point of order. Okay. In this current moment, we are just have a copy of the text being copied up, I believe. So who's your favorite faculty? Engineering? Just joking. We all know it's AHS. Okay. Guys, we're going to need 2 minutes. Make a friend. If you don't know the person next to you, introduce yourself. If you do, turn around, person behind you. Just don't leave your seats.
Hey everyone, this is an announcement for those of you listening at home or any of you who don't want to stick up your hands and you're in the audience. We are accepting questions by Twitter. Is anyone monitoring email as well? Just by Twitter for now. So that's Twitter at UWFeds if you have any questions and you're at home and you want to contribute to the meeting. Also, apparently you're missing out on ice cream if you don't go, but if you can make it here in time, there will be ice cream at the end of the meeting. I heard that could be a lie.
Okay, so just to keep you apprised, because I'd like to be a good speaker, I don't like leaving my listeners in the dark. Just want to let you know we're just looking into some things about the logistical nature of doing amendments at a special meeting, a continuation of a meeting. So my understanding is that we're just doing a small inquiry right now, but we'll have a resolution in a moment, one way or the other. In the interim, why don't we do some Feds fun facts? Oh, do we know? So who knows when the Federation of Students was founded? Yeah, 1967. April 27th. Dave, is that right? Sorry. You guys might all know Dave McDougall over there. Dave's the club services assistant. He's April 1967. That sounds about right to me. That's when we would have got our Corporations Act. Second question. How many Feds presidents are currently in this room? 2. Not current. Current and past. 1, 2, 3. Does anyone know? I think we're at 4. We got Matt Collins in the back. Shout out to Matt. We got Becky over here. Ooh, Becky runs your orientation week, if you didn't know that. Becky, when were you president? Oh, 4 or 5 years? 04, 05. Yeah, that's right. Becky now runs Early Effective Orientation Week. For any of those of you who are in first year, you probably were participating in activities as a result of Becky. I am literally just stalling, so I'm really sorry. Tell you fun facts about what did I do while I was president? Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Yeah, Alex knows. Well, when I was Fed's president in 2009, we held 3 referendums that year. We had a referendum for a new health services expansion. Many of you have seen today. That was a $10 million expansion that students voted on. We also had a referendum for an $80 million student services complex. The referendum unfortunately failed at the point of vote, but I believe student space is still an issue. So I hope that it continues to be discussed. We also had a referendum in 2009 to vote in if we're going to keep Sound FM. Is it Sound FM? No. What's the radio station? They were the old radio station, the campus. Anybody know? Anyway, we used to have a campus radio station that failed at the referendum. Otherwise, I didn't do a whole lot. Oh, we started a long-range plan. Yeah. We're good to go. The meeting is back on. Thank you very much for... okay, we have no point of order. We're continuing on. All right, there's a motion on the table. You can read it up here. Anything that in red is the change. Do I have a seconder on the amendment? Yes, and where's my microphone guru? Second microphone person? One of you guys has a second mic? It's just so we have it recorded. I know that, I'm sure you can speak up, but sorry, thanks, Adam. Just your name?
Anna Maria Retta.
Anna Maria Retta. Okay, great. So thank you. Now the speaking turn's open. Where's our mover? There you go. And here's the mic.
Okay, so I made this amendment because I think it creates a board that is better able to oversee how the executive operate, and it creates more student opportunities for students to get involved with the organization at that top level, kind of outlining the direction that Feds goes in. So that's why I changed it to be 10 at-large members. The president is still a member because under the current law, the president has to be a director, so it's to be conformant with the current law. And the paragraph in the middle, the second red paragraph, is just to make it clear that directors have to be legally allowed to be a director. That used to be in the bylaws. It got stricken under this amendment. I felt it was good to kind of keep it in there for clarity. The secretary of the board, because there's no longer the corporate secretary on board who automatically defaults to being the secretary, there's a statement in there to allow board to pick a secretary. And the very last sentence is there so that if either the secretary or chair is not present, the meeting can still happen. So that way board can still meet. But yeah, I think this is a good change. I think it I think it's a positive change for the organization, and feel free to debate. Thank you.
Yeah, so we do have a speaker's line that started over here. I just want to remind everyone that an annual general meeting is not a forum for debate. Annual general meeting is an opportunity to bring forward important changes that affect the corporation. It is certainly an opportunity to make sure that your opinion is heard on the matter, but it's not a discussion back and forth.
Thank you very much, Alan. So this is just a question for the mover and the executive as well. Has this change gone through ratification by BP&P, and has our lawyer had a chance to look through this? By BP&P is the Bylaws, Policies, and Procedure Committee, which is one of the standing committees of the Federation of Students.
Sorry, so these particular changes were looked at the lawyer last October and vetted then, as were they by BP&P last year, so they haven't necessarily been approved by BP&P this year, but they have previously gone through both bodies. And
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, come on up. You can say whatever you want.
Okay, so first I would just like to speak to Jesse's point about getting the lawyer to approve these changes in October. The lawyer was under the impression that these had already been passed and was not giving his feedback on whether or not they were a good choice. He actually expressed concerns in his email, so I wouldn't say that he has approved them. And I would also like to amend the amendment to strike the not-for-profit corporations part, because the Corporations Act is currently in effect and not the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act.
Okay, so there's an amendment to the amendment to the amendment. If you're following. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder on the amendment to the amendment to the amendment? Can you just say your name again for me?
Jesse McGinnis.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks. She's looking through the Corporations Act about your amendment? Okay, so we can continue our conversation. Sorry, we have the where's the mover? Mover of this motion? Who just left? No, where are you? The mover of the amendment to the amendment to the amendment has an opportunity to speak on her amendment, which apparently is incorrect. Okay, so we're striking that last after the comma?
Yes, I'd like to strike the whole section after the comma.
I'm going to assume that's friendly. Friendly means we're not going to do another vote. So at the end of bankrupt, we put a period. Thank you to our wonderful secretary. Yep. So everyone agrees? Okay. Does anyone want to speak to this amendment? It seems pretty straightforward. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment to the amendment, please raise your placards nice and high. Just for the sake of this, all those opposed? All those opposed, if you're listening, just so we don't have to count. Any abstentions? Okay, motion's unanimous. Can we accept that? Everyone's okay with that? Okay, thank you. So we're back on the amendment to the amendment, right? So now we're approving, Jesse's, we have the speaking turn, and I believe you're on line next. Is that, or no? You spoke to your motion. Is there someone else who's in this line? This was my line. David, you're next. Yeah, David, this is your second and last speaking turn.
I think that one of the major concerns I have, not necessarily with this, but right now is, as you can see, it's not only an incredibly messy process at a general meeting, which doesn't make it very fun to go to. Who here is actually having fun listening to this? Please raise your hands. That's great to see. That's a totally representative part of the student population, I must add. I think, though, that one of the main reasons that we should at least be not only striking down this entire thing, but at least possibly re-examining it at a later date, is for the primary reason that this has not actually been vetted through the other elected parts of the student population that you have actually elected. Right now, this is an unfamiliar territory, as it were, and again, if you want to have students actually care about what's going on, these meetings need to be fast, they need to be filled with the correct information, and we do not have curveballs thrown at us. It doesn't make it exciting to be here. And again, that's how we increase student engagement. That's how we actually get more students out, is because students will actually care to be here. And that's huge for me, and I hope it's just as big for you. So anyways, I would motion to, well, I would say, let's strike down this entire thing, Let's have these discussions outside of here. We can actually consult with students that are not on summer term. Let's make sure that we actually are a transparent, accountable, and good student union. In my opinion, what you're doing right now, if you vote for this, is you're not listening to your peers. You're not being a representative person. And right now, it's interesting and both frustrating, in my opinion, that this is even a possibility that we haven't been able to talk to other students about this. This is a localized, this is a small room. And again, I think that this is that's something we should do. Thank you.
Thanks, David. There's a speaking line. If anyone does want to speak, please go to the line. I'll call up the next speaker.
Hi, my name is Sean Hunt. The amendment that we're discussing right now would, if adopted and then adopted properly, would implement a significant change to the governance structure of this corporation. For those of you who don't know, right now we have an elected Students' Council and a Board of Directors which is selected from that Students' Council. My original motion was to expand the Board of Directors and to move some members from, and to put some members on the Board of Directors who are not elected from Students' Council. The bicameral, the two different body structure is an interesting one, and the effect of the structure is that Students' Council is intended for dealing with matters of educational policy, things like what do the students believe. It's a representative body of 30 people, I think, elected from across the faculties. The Board of Directors, by contrast, is the operational oversight of the Federation. They manage things like the finances and have ultimate decisions over things like hiring or whether or not they're going to close the bomber. I mean, I'd hope they wouldn't close the bomber, but that'd be the board that makes that decision. And the board is also responsible for overseeing the executive. This is a key property of the board because we have 4 elected executive who run the corporation day to day and who are accountable to and whose decisions are vetted by the board. So I'm going to say why I really do not believe that we should make the board 10 members elected at large because in the meeting. First off, because there does need to be some communication between the Students' Council and the board. Making it just members who are not, making it members who are separate from the Students' Council means that we run the risk that we have 2 arms of the Federation with almost nothing in common. The only thing they would have in common is that the president of the corporation sits on both bodies. And I don't think that it's a duty of the president to mediate between those bodies. I think that's an important part of why we should have an overlap, both in the executive, the 4 executives, 3 of whom would be removed by this amendment, and in the 2 current Students' Council members, which are currently 5, but the other amendment would bring down to 2. Additionally, I think that it's important to have all the executive there. The way that the Federation is structured, the vice presidents do not report to the president. The president is the chief executive, and he's in charge, sort of, but not really. He's not responsible for managing the vice presidents, and this amendment would create a big disparity between the way that the president and the vice presidents are treated, because the president has the power and right to bring a proposal before the board, but the vice presidents do not. The vice presidents do not need to be given a place in the room under this amendment, and this means that the vice presidents have no way of guaranteeing that the board is even hearing their concerns. They report to the board, but unlike the president, they can't force anything upon the board, and they don't report to the president, so there's no one-on-one dialogue. I also think that 11 members is more than is necessary. I will explain later why I believe that 11, sorry, I miscounted. No, I'm good on that part. But so I believe that this change to the corporation structure would be negative, and so I highly encourage you all to vote it down. Thank you.
Okay, just a reminder that we do have a speaker's line if anyone does wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment. Yeah. Yeah. If you have a quick question. Yeah.
Accountable to the board if the board consists of mainly executive?
So the question is, how did the executive report to the board if the executive are a part of the board? That's a very good question.
I think that to some extent, there are a couple of reasons. The first is because the executive don't always get along. The executive are, the executive do not necessarily form a voting block on the board. And currently, the executive don't have a majority on the board. I think that it's very slim. It's currently 5-4. I think that having that increased, and that's why my original motion did increase the number of board members to 11, to make sure that the executive did represent a weaker, like a smaller portion of the board. But I don't think that removing 3 executive from the board will actually increase accountability. I think it may decrease accountability because then the vice presidents are not in the same position to defend their decisions against the board. And they can't participate in the same way at the board in discussing and contributing to the board's decisions. Thank you.
So if there are any other points of clarification, I can answer them throughout about how the governance model actually works, but we're going to continue on with our speakers list at this time.
My name is Joshua Calpin. Program? Doesn't matter. Oh. So I am for this motion on the basis that the current board structure contains the executive, and even though with the original amendment that the executive would not hold close to a majority of the board positions, they should still not have, they should have one member of the executive as a collective on the board as a presence. The board is designed to oversee the executive's structure and oversee the corporation itself, and if the executive themselves can say, oh, we're doing just fine, when a lot of people disagree with that, I see that being contradictory, and I don't know, that's contradictory. So I would just say vote for this motion because this allows anybody that wants to try and oversee the Federation of Students, which represents every single student, able to do that and doesn't restrict who is in charge or mandate that certain people that are already in a position of power are in charge of themselves.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Adam Garcia. I'm the Vice President Education, so at least I've declared my position if anyone thinks that I have bias. I just want to talk about part of a way to do really healthy governance changes and ways to actually find accountability is to look at best practice across other student unions in Ontario in particular because they follow the same laws as we do. And I think that that's one thing that's been missing here because I can recognize that there has been an issue identified, it's accountability of the executive, but there are a number of ways that people or student unions in Ontario operate to actually hold executive accountable, and this is actually a very rare model. In particular, I can think of the McMaster Students Union, where all of the executives are the only board of directors, and they're held accountable by a operational board made up of counselors and executives. I can think of Brock University Students Union. Their governance structure has half of their executive on it and a number of other students. So I would like to speak against this motion on the basis of we don't actually know if making this change will actually do anything to improve the issue that has been identified. And I think that that's something that we should be holding ourselves accountable to do when we make governance changes. We should make sure that they're thought out, that they are well researched, that we have consulted on them, and that's something that personally I feel has been lacking with this particular change. And so again, I would just like to repeat that I'm speaking against this.
Thank you. Next speaker. Jesse. Okay, this is your second speaking turn and your last.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. There are people waiting to speak without spoken once.
Fair point. Jesse, do you mind waiting? Okay, has anyone not spoken who's standing in our speakers line? Are you guys just hanging out? Are you on the speakers list? Have you spoken once before? No, to this? Yes, you did. So Jesse, you're up. Oh, is there someone else? Come on up, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Devin Singh. As I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this amendment, I think we should vote against this amendment because we voted these execs into our Fed's student the student body elected these execs. And I don't think that we should remove them from the board because they have their ideas that they want to implement, and they campaign for at least 2 weeks to get these, to be elected. So if we remove them from the board, they would not be able to influence they would not be able to put their ideas forward and be able to influence them as well as if they were off the board. So I don't know if that made sense to anyone, but I seriously think that this is a bad idea, and I think we should go against this amendment.
Okay, next on our speakers list, I think we're down to 2.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Natasha Bozega, and I'm our current VP Operations and Finance. Personally, I would like to speak against this amendment, simply because the 2 concerns that were brought forward for why they would like to pass these bylaw changes are for transparency and to hold the exec accountable. In my opinion, the board should be holding the exec accountable, and I would like them to hold me accountable because I was elected to represent students, and that's exactly what I would like to do. So if the board thinks that I need to do my job differently, I really hope they would tell me so. The transparency point, I don't see this solving our sorry, I'm sick, this is awful. I don't see this solving our transparency issues because we currently have 5 outlets from within the organization to the board. We have the 4 executive as well as our general manager. By limiting this to only the president, especially with the VPs not reporting to the president, you're taking away 4 of those 5 channels of information flowing out of the organization to students, and I just don't think that that's a good choice.
Thank you. Okay, I believe this is the last speaker. If anyone else wants to speak, please come forward, but Jesse, your second speaking turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously I'm speaking in favor of these changes, having been the mover of them. I think the concern around exec not being able to partake in board isn't valid. I think it will still be expected, since board is meant to oversee all of the executive, for the executive to attend. If board asks anyone within the organization to come to one of their meetings, there's an expectation that they will be there to report and answer any questions board has. So I think under this model, we will not lose any of that information flow between board and the executive. I think what this does is it reinforces the idea that the role of board is to oversee the executive. And again, the only reason the president was left as a voting member of board and not removed from board like the VPs is because under the current act, it's a requirement of law. So they have a special spot. Again, the idea is to reinforce that board is there to oversee the executive and kind of make that day-to-day versus long-term a separate and unique body, which I think ultimately will be healthy for this organization because we have people whose primary purpose is not the day-to-day. Their primary purpose is to oversee the people who implement the day-to-day and in their own discussions think about some of the long-term implications and some of the long-term priorities relating to our long-range plan or relating to the annual plan that the exec proposed, whatever it may be. Secondly, there was a point made of not looking at other schools. I just want to quickly state there are other schools that do operate under this model. Laurier is under a slightly different version but very close, or there's I think it's McMaster. So there are schools that have models similar to this, so it's not that it's completely out of nowhere. There is other schools that operate successfully with a model like this. But that is all. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just humor one question from the audience. Yeah.
When would these changes come into effect?
Yeah, do you know, Jesse, the answer to that? Immediately? Yeah? Okay, immediately. Thanks. So my second speaker, Matt Golfin. Thank you, Jesse. Got 3 more speakers.
Hi again, everyone. I have a few serious concerns about this motion. Firstly, Jesse identified that there are other boards that are working under this model, Laurier being one of them. In the last year, though, I've noted that Laurier has actually posted an operating loss across their organization of several $1 million. They've also had huge turnover. Their general manager has also resigned, and there's a lot of other issues. So necessarily copying a model of a school's whose student union isn't working may not be the best thing for our organization. Secondly, the purpose of the board isn't necessarily to hold the executive accountable. It's to make sure that the best interest of the corporation is served. Those are 2 unique things, and it is important to note the difference between them. Holding the executive accountable is the job of every student in this room. It's the job of our students' council, but day-to-day operations and holding them accountable through that isn't what the board is designed to do. It's to make sure that the best interests of the corporation are held and that it is still a viable model overall. On top of that, there's a lot of other things that go on at board where it's important to have a small body that has a lot of knowledge. By removing people like your VP Operations and Finance, your VP Internal, and your VP Education, you're taking away a lot of knowledge from the Board of Directors. Yes, you can call them in resource members at any time, but a lot of good discussion happens when you do bring them into the discussion right away, when they are there by default. For instance, when you look at the Fed Hall negotiations, some of our key players in that happen to be our VP Education or VP Internal, not because their portfolios called for it, but because of the personalities that were in the room. On top of that, having more and more people in the room does take away things. I know we are looking for more transparency, and we're looking to have every aspect of what the Federation of Students does open and exposed to every single student. However, there are times when having people that you trust, that have been elected, that do have the knowledge that you need in a room like that does contribute positively to the organization. If you go into negotiation with all your cards open with full transparency, you lose a lot of that. We would have lost a lot of things, and we would have had a harder time doing what was best for the students and for the organization, having this kind of structure without having those executives on board, without having that additional knowledge base. So I really do strongly think that this motion is not something that is going to be healthy for the organization. And one other point to that as well is having a model right now that we have where the vice presidents don't report to the president does not work well with this. You've got 3 people who should be accountable to the board who don't meet with the board regularly, and that doesn't help. This makes that situation even worse. Even if everything else I said doesn't resonate with you, think of that one point, the fact that you don't have oversight of the vice presidents through the line of the president, through the board of directors by adopting this structure. So once again, I do implore all of you to seriously vote against this motion and consider what would be best overall for the corporation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. We have 3 more speakers on our list.
So I'm Elizabeth McFall. So I am in favor of these changes. I think that it's necessary for us to consider a new model that allows more students to get involved in board's processes, and that may help transparency if board chooses to be transparent. There's nothing forcing it in the model. But I'd like to address some of the factual errors pointed out by another member about the Laurier model. The reason behind their debt has nothing to do with how board was operating, and it's very internal and is a staff-related issue, and it has nothing to do with whether or not they had students on a board or executive on the board, because all of their executive missed it. It wouldn't have mattered if they were on board or not.
Hi again. One of the earlier speakers, Devin, made me realize something very significant that I think is very relevant, and is that consider that the exec elections, we have a big election, the executive with different priorities, and the students cast their votes in favor of the executive whose priorities they prefer. Then, at the general meeting, with 10 seats to fill, the losers in the race get nominated, some of them get elected. What if they get a majority? I mean, this could happen with any model of directors, but if the executive, or if there's just one executive on the board, we could end up we could very easily end up with a situation where the executive are elected, and then at a general meeting, which admittedly is less representative than the general population of the student body, elects a board that, acclaims a board, because 10 people might not run for the election, acclaims a board full of people who oppose those executives' ideals, and then proceed to adopt resolutions directing the executive to implement their vision and not the executives. I think that this is a serious risk, and I think that that alone is a significant reason to consider voting this down.
Thank you. Okay, our last speaker. I'm going to cut off the conversation here. We're going to do a vote. Question's been called. Before we do that, though, I do want to make sure that, because I didn't give opportunities to ask questions throughout, are there any questions related to what the heck they're talking about, right? Not necessarily particular questions about, but what is the board? Everyone has a good understanding of the relevance of this vote. Yep.
If the exec are not on the board, how are they going to pass or implement anything that they had in their platform?
Yeah.
And that
So
I, as a student, voted on?
Right, I'm just going to answer that question from a procedural standpoint, assuming you have a president who's on the board, that president would, and your executive report to the president, if I'm understanding this correctly? No, they don't. Okay, so assumingly the president would bring, or the executive would have an opportunity to bring something to the board for the board to discuss, then the majority of the board would have to approve that decision. Does that make sense? So to answer your question,
I'm just a little confused that, so the reason we want to elect 10 members is because we want to sort of make the board of directors transparent. We want the information to be out there. Isn't technically right now saying you're allowed to go to the board member and then board can go into confidential sessions anyways, as long as they want to? What's wrong with it? Just like understand transparency is more with this, but there is still transparency right now because you're allowed to go to board member.
right. Okay. I was just making sure everyone understands, all right? So the question, just to make sure,
Just the clarification
is that what's different?
now, from what I understand.
Okay, so it's more of an opinion. So yeah, it isn't a question. I'm not going to answer that, okay? Okay. So at this point in time, I'd like to call the question. The motion is as read up there. Does anyone need me to read it? All those in favor, placards nice and high? Point of order. The speaker's list is exhausted. They're voting on calling the question. We're voting on calling the question even though the speaker's list is exhausted? Speaker's list is exhausted, end of conversation. We're voting on the amendment to the amendment. We are voting on this, what you see in front of you. Which placards are they allowed to raise? Orange and yellow. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment? Okay. Can I get a second counter, please? Maybe a third. Keep them nice and high. What number? Yeah, we got it. Thank you. We got the count. We got the count. We have a double confirmed. That was all those in favor, all those opposed. Nice and high, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Adam? Okay, thank you. Yes, I did. Any abstentions? Would you like that noted? What's your name? Luke, abstained. The motion at 42 to 73 to 1. Motion fails. Thank you for the discussion. We are now going back to the proposed amendment. Yeah, the original, thank you. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see before you is something we are going to work through, and we are going to approve or we are not going to approve, and then we are going to continue on with our first meeting. I appreciate your cooperation. Is there any discussion on the proposed amendment as is, carrying over from last term? The March general meeting, to be specific. Seeing no discussion. Pardon me? describe the board structure as it is? Would you like me to read it? Would you like me to read the Sorry, I've just been asked to read the description of the board structure. The first sentence? Okay. Amending section 8B, membership to read as follows. The board of directors shall consist of the 4 executive, 2 councilors, and 5 full members of the corporation. Additionally, the general manager shall serve as an ex officio non-voting resource member. No individual may hold multiple seats on the board. Shall I keep reading? We're good? I'm going to call a question. All those in favor, please raise your placards nice and high. Can I get a second counter, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Voting. You're voting on 8A. Adam? Just keep them up, and you'll get ice cream in your hand. It will fall from the heavens with sprinkles and chocolate and syrup. See, some of you have been using the CIF, pumping up those arms. Thank you. All those opposed? All those opposed to 8A? All right. Nice and high, please. Nice and high. If you're voting, I'm counting you now. Alex, if anyone has a placard and they are actually voting, I'd need to see it. We're just going to count this one. It's close. Okay, guys. Are there any abstentions? I do have to do a recount of those opposed. So abstentions just right now? Sorry. 4 abstentions. Anyone want that noted? No? Okay. So sorry, just to make sure, because you know we want to do this right. All those opposed. Just going to recount the opposed. Or sorry, for all those in favor. All those in favor. I apologize for all of those of you. The other people need to exercise their arms. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We did, right? Okay. Yeah, some more people voted that time. Okay. Okay, thank you. So my final numbers are in favor 53, against 47, abstentions 4. Motion is approved. Okay. I have a question. Sorry, the question is, do we elect 2 new directors today? It's at the next general meeting, is my understanding.
Just a point of clarification.
Yep.
Since technically now we have 2 vacant director seats, do we fill them now?
No, we do that at the next general assembly. Or a special meeting will be called by your board of directors. Okay. You have a question. What's your question? The next general meeting is technically today, it's a special meeting. This will not be discussed at a special meeting. This follows subsequently at the October General Assembly. Or earlier, should one be called. There are a variety of methods to call one. We're not going into those details today. We're going to continue on with the proposed amendments as you see here. This brings us to 8B, 8C, and 8D to get through the first agenda. Everyone following? Comprende. Okay. 8B, add a bullet to the list section 10A, officers reading chair of the board, and reformat the list appropriately. We're doing it as one motion. I'm going to keep reading. We just split 8A off to have a discussion. Everything else might follow in one vote. Can you just scroll for me so I can see the bottom there? 8C, amend the second paragraph of section XF president to read as follows. The president shall preside at all general meetings. 8D, adding a new section to Article 10, officers entitled chair of the board, reading as follows. The chair of the board shall be elected by the board of directors at its first meeting each year to serve for that year or until the successor is elected. The chair of the board must be a director. The chair of the board shall, 1, preside over all meetings of the board, 2, serve as a resource to the other directors, especially the directors who are not executives, 3, act as a liaison between the board and Students' Council. I'll have the mover speak to the motion.
All right, thank you, everyone. So this is the other part of the motion that I brought forth in March. This would make it so that the president is not necessarily the chairman of the board of directors. And the reason, for context, the second paragraph of section 10F president currently reads, the president shall preside at all meetings, all general meetings and all meetings of the board of directors. So that change is just to make it so that he doesn't preside at the board of directors meetings anymore. So the reason that I'm bringing this forward is because, first off, I think that the president already has many things to do, and splitting off his responsibilities is a good thing. I think that having an impartial chair will make it easier for the non-executive board members to challenge the president, because then they don't get the sense that the president is in control of the meeting of the directors. And since the president may be personally invested in many of the proposals he brings forward to the board, I think that this will result in a more effective board of directors. There's been a fair amount of concern of late of the president being the chair, and so I think that this motion will improve things significantly. I also think that having the board chair act as a representative of board to Students' Council will improve the communications there, because it will make clear that the board as an entity is communicating with Students' Council and not just the executive. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Does anyone have any questions about the motions on the table, or would like to speak to the motions presented? The amendments, yes. Just say your name.
So my name is Anna Maria Retta, and I just have a question to the mover. So does this allow the president to be elected as the chair of the board? Okay. Thank you.
The answer is yes. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Sean, just to confirm, we're moving all of these at the same time, and it excludes 8A. All right. So, assuming there's no further conversation, as presented here, 8B, 8C, 8D would be changed to reflected as follows. We're going to vote. All those in favor, placards nice and high. Can I get a counter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. going to double check our count. I got 16. You got 57? I got, oh, sorry. 57, I got 61.
You got 61? Oh, I think it's 67. I was like, wow, we're way off.
Okay, all those opposed? Okay, nice and high if you're opposed. Oh yeah, reach that arm up, Becky. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any abstentions? Would any of you, okay. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Would any of you like your abstentions noted? No, we have one, okay. Okay, so that second noted, another noted, okay. So that motion is at 58 to 8 to 14. This carries. You now have your new bylaws as presented up here. All right, I'm glad you're excited about that because I am too. Sean.
I move to elect 2 directors to fill the vacancies on the board.
So Sean has encouraged me to kick my coffee over. Oh, it's okay, I got ice cream. You move to elect 2 directors to the board. Is that within our rights to do? Does anyone know? I just have a logistical error. I like the assembly to pause for a moment while we figure this out. My understanding is that this motion's out of order. You'll get your chance. The reason is that that this hasn't been properly made aware to the public on the advice of the lawyer of the corporation. Filling these seats without notice to, first of all, the general public, but also the current existing board of directors, that their board structure is changing and that there's a possibility to fill it. First of all, may not speak kindly to what students feel, this change is in the spirit of, which is allowing more transparency and people to get involved. And secondly, logistically, I don't believe it's correct that we've been advised not to continue from the lawyer's perspective. Okay, so I'm gonna say that can't proceed. Is there any other questions? You like to challenge me in a duel? Just so you know, challenging the chair is a logistical practice of Robert's rules where if someone deems me to be incorrect, they can correct me. Please do.
So notice has been provided by nature of this bylaw amendment. Everyone was aware that this had the possibility of passing and that these seats would be vacant. So the notice requirement has been met and we are perfectly in line to elect board members at a general meeting.
You are able to elect board members at a meeting.
At this meeting, because the notice has already been met.
The notice that there would potentially be positions should this been voted in favor is your rationale. Technically, this has been out since the March general meeting. I'm going to turn to the executive, who are my boss in this instance, just to make sure that if we are proceeding, it's... I appreciate your challenge, though, and I would take you up on a duel, because I might win. Yeah. Sweating buckets up here. What? No. Okay, so we have an answer. My understanding is David's just going to explain to you the legal advice that's been given and the procedural implications of moving forward.
Thanks so much, Alan. The advice that I've been given is that because this structure has been implemented after the board was actually elected in, you can't retroactively change it, or at least on the advice of our lawyer, we're not supposed to retroactively change the structure of the board until next year, which means that this structure would not actually come into play until the 2014-2015 executive year, which begins, I believe, May 1st. So elections, yeah, there we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's my understanding of the logistical practices. Because you all elected and approved at the March General Meeting a board of directors, that board of directors came in and took the responsibility of overseeing the corporation with the expectation that the board structure would be as such for the duration of the year, that this will not actually come into effect until the following year, okay? It does not allow us to move forward with this motion at this time. Moving forward, we have adjournment on the agenda. Is there anything else? You're welcome to raise a point, yes? If it's directed at me.
Well, I guess this is out of order.
The only thing we're accepting right now is...
Sorry, no, this
Yep.
is just a comment. If these do become in immediately, based on this Rosum, I think we need to look at this with the lawyer. People do have a chance to run for these director seats at the next council meeting. So that's an alternative, depending on how this works out.
Okay, I think what will happen is as a result of the bylaw changes that you just approved, you have now tasked your bylaw policy procedure and students council to present this appropriately. I think we have someone else who wants to talk. Jesse?
So just further point, the general meeting is allowed to change the structure of board at any time that it wishes under Article 285(1) for those that are talking to the lawyer. So a corporation may by special resolution increase or decrease the number of its directors. So that is at any time. So I would say clearly we are allowed to adjust the structure of board, which would put this amendment friendly and able to go into effect immediately, and would fall back to our previous arguments about whether notice has been given or not, but I think we're at a different spot right now. So
We are. We're discussing the legal implications.
This should be going into effect immediately.
Okay. So, well, I appreciate that. You know, my preference is to move forward without the election at this time. The General Assembly could choose to differ, and we could have an election technically, but my understanding is on the advice of the executive, on the representative of the staff, that this is not the appropriate time to have such an election. So in your current amendment, it's been pointed out, the directors, other than the executive, shall be elected at the March General Meeting to hold office for the subsequent year, suggesting that would be March. Do you want to run for board? Oh, he's on the board. Oh, okay, I see. You want to run for board. Oh, he's on the board. So who wants to run for board here? Why are we having this conversation? Ah, this guy. So this is saying very clearly here, shall be elected to hold office for the subsequent year, correct? Which would technically be this upcoming year, which is right now. We're still technically in the March meeting, which is the subsequent year, which is this year. Yes, we have someone who's very excited.
So point of order, it was my understanding that the chair's ruling has been challenged and we should be moving forward on voting that. We understand your ruling, but it was challenged.
Touché. I have been challenged. Therefore, you get to vote on the person who challenged me, whether I'm correct or not. This might resolve our issue or not, depending on how you look at it. So thank you for the clarification. Challenged me a second time, but we're not going to go into that. The original challenge is that we will proceed with an election. Is this the direction that I'm getting? We're voting on whether or not that challenge was correct. Am I correct? Can I get some guidance from our... All right. So we're saying a 2/3 supermajority would deem me incorrect. and allow you to move forward with an election? Simple majority. Sean? 2 moments. Clarification. Okay, so just because I needed some counsel, because first of all, I wasn't expecting this, A, and B, I was challenged. My understanding of the challenge is to vote in favor or against upholding the decision of the chair. The decision of the chair is to move forward as planned on the agenda with no election. If you vote against that, then the decision would be against my decision to delay this, but not necessarily to have an election. You're voting on whether or not I'm correct. Does that make sense? There is opportunity for people to speak for or against whether or not I was right or wrong. I will allow that speaker's list, should anyone wish to speak. Perhaps the mover will speak to the fact, again, why I was challenged. You already had that chance? Yeah, you already had that chance. Alex, would you like to speak for or against?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. If we're going to vote for an election and the first concern was being transparent, should we not be transparent to the massive student body that we were actually holding an election today?
This is Alex's speaking turn. He's a full-time staff of the Federation of Students. Please give him that respect.
My concern is that putting this forward into the, as it was advertised, is not actually, the standard student would not understand that we were going to hold an election today, and there's not enough students here today to, well, there are, but there's not a positive representation of the student body here for this.
I'm Elizabeth. I wanted to speak in favor of the chair's decision, just for 2 reasons. First, if you read the second full paragraph down there, it gives the board a chance to elect any vacancies at the next board of directors meeting. So the next BOD meeting, they can actually elect or appoint members as they see fit. And then as well, having recently been through the procedures for elections for council and board of directors, if there is a vacancy, it has to be posted on the Fed's website. Someone puts forward their name and they have to be posted for 7 full days in order to give somebody an opportunity to challenge that. And I feel like even though this has been on the website since March, it's not adequate notice.
Okay, thank you.
Speaking to Elizabeth's point, I'm Joanna. I'd like to mention that there have been signs around the school saying that there will be Feds elections today and that you can vote on the website. Thus, we have been informed that there were elections, but not the specific meeting.
So are you for or against the chair?
Right now, I am for the chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers to this? Sir?
I'd like to argue against the chair on one of the members' points that the name needs to be posted publicly for 7 days. Those are for the councillor elections. For the having been elected at this very meeting when it started in March, all that happens is anyone can bring forward a name, anyone can nominate anyone, and then it's the members that vote. This is a continuation of that same meeting. So we're just continuing the election. We elected the first 5 then, and we're electing the next 2 now. Technically, the notice was provided because this is a continuation of the March meeting, and more than enough notice has been provided that the vote was taking place at the March meeting, which took place in March. And this is a continuation of the meeting. We're finishing the election.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the challenge of the chair? If you do, please come.
Okay, so I would like to speak in favor of the chair's decision. I think that we can argue about the technicalities of whether or not notice was given, but I think that having the election today would be incredibly sneaky thing to do. And I think if we're trying to make the Federation of Students more transparent, then we shouldn't be arguing about whether there is notice. We should all agree that there was notice.
I'm in favor of the chair. Realistically, I don't know why we're all forcing it to happen today. You should give your peers the opportunity to run for this who are not here, who weren't sure that this was going to pass or not. Again, it was an option that it might not go through. So whoever's not here, you should give them the opportunity to actually run for a member of board.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm Elizabeth. I'm speaking against the ruling of the chair. I'd like to bring up one point, and that is that by not having elections today or in the subsequent meeting, these two new at-large students have no opportunity to run for the chair position because board's going to need a chair and they're going to elect a chair at their next meeting. And these two students who would have had the opportunity to become the chair no longer have that opportunity. I think that we should be doing those elections today. Notice has been given, notice has been sufficiently given. There are a number of students out here who are interested in the positions, and I think that that should be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. We have one or two more members on our speakers list. Adam, thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Garcia. I'd also like to speak in favor of the chair's ruling for the primary purpose that the decision was made on the advice of our lawyer. And of course, we do want our organization to be in good legal standing, and taking the advice of a trained professional is helpful in that regard. And so in this, I understand that there are a lot of concerns about the technicalities and the notice and things like that, but given the fact that the advice of our lawyer has been to not proceed with elections at this meeting, I would encourage folks to be in line with that.
Okay, thank you. David?
Hi everyone, my name is Kevin McNamara. I would like to speak in favor of voting against the chair's ruling on the basis that the remainder of the board of directors seats, which were elected at the beginning of this meeting in March, were elected by a group of less people than are actually at this meeting right now. So to say that the informed students aren't actually here is not valid in my opinion. Thank you.
Hi, what I would like to simply say is that in the event of a vacancy among the elected directors, including due to the failure of the March general meeting to elect a full 7 directors, the board of directors may appoint a replacement from the councilors or full members as the case may be. I believe that would apply now. I believe that the chair's ruling should be overruled.
Hello, everyone, again. I'm on the phone right now with the lawyer, and again, his understanding of this document is that it doesn't really matter if we are in the continuation of the March general meeting. It actually matters more what day it is now, which I believe is July 16th, although it may be different for some other calendars around the world. This here is what the language clearly states, is that we are supposed to be electing people for next year. And not only am I upholding what the chair says, but it should be very apparent to all of us that the language here states that they are supposed to be elected for next year. Again, this is on the advice of our lawyer, and also through the documents that you have available here. There's nothing else, in my opinion, that should be discussed. I think that we should uphold the ruling of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm speaking against the chair's ruling. Just want to highlight what Sean brought up, the fact that in the event of a vacancy among the elected directors, including due to failure of the March general meeting, which is this meeting currently, to elect a full 7 directors, which we would do if we do not hold this election, then the board of directors may appoint a replacement, which means if we do not hold the election today, of these approximately, based off the number of votes, 70, 100 people, then it is a decision of 9, I think 100 people. Even if you feel that better notice could have been made, that is a fair concern. But if we don't hold the election today, then it is the decision of 9 people versus all of the people in this room. And I think a decision of all of the people in this room is a more democratic process than leaving it to 9 people to choose who they would. So again, I would speak against the chair's ruling because I think this body is the best democratic process we have available to us based off the language in this amendment. Thank you.
Are there more speakers? Is there anyone else on the speakers list? Because then we have to vote on calling the question, but if you're not on the speakers list and there's no one else, we're good. So will you retract that? You're just removing an extra unnecessary vote.
Okay, sure.
Retracted. Thank you. Okay, not that I'm putting words in your mouth. Just retracted. Okay, thank you. Okay, so because there's no more speakers list, trying to call the question, but we can continue on now with the vote. I'm just going to remind you, the vote is in favor, so all those in favor would be in favor of moving on without the proposed amended election. All those opposed would be against me turning down the idea of adding that to the agenda. Make sense? Any questions? So, okay, anyone in favor is in favor of us continuing without the amendment? Sorry, I said amendment, I should have said elections. Amendment to the agenda to add a motion to have an election. The amendment. If you're on my side, you vote yes. If you're not, you vote no. Is there any concerns about what that means? All those in favor, please raise your placards, nice and high. Okay, this is in favor of me, yes? Of the chair.
Just so you know, you do.
Great. Thank you. All those abstained. We have 1, 2. Would you like those noted? Okay, that's Luke. Okay, Luke, so there's 2. So the ruling is 55-45, 2. Motion carries. I'm correct. At this point in time, I would like to motion to adjourn, which is currently what's on our agenda. Can I switch back to our agenda, please? Is there a mover to adjourn? I see in the back, Brad, is there a seconder? Thank you, David. All those in favor of adjournment of the March General Meeting, please raise your placards nice and high. All those opposed? All those opposed of adjourning, please, I know it's been a long meeting, but if you're not listening and you're representing 23,000 students, then you're not present. 28,000. Okay, thank you. I'm the chair. I'm speaking right now. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the craziness is not done. I'm serious. We're going to continue on because I would have... Yep. Okay, we're going to take, because I have learned from our professors, spending too many hours sitting down, you lose a little bit of focus, and ice cream starts to melt. So, before you move, we do have ice cream ready to thank you for coming out on behalf of the feds. We do have a special second annual general meeting that was brought forward by the board of directors. That is something that is going to start exactly at 6:35. If you would like ice cream, please line up in an orderly fashion.